Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a radical and, honestly, absolutely necessary shift in how organizations treat their people. For decades, right, we've relied on basic administration. But today, we're moving toward intentionally designing contexts for human flourishing. So let's unpack this fascinating framework by Chiara Perozzini and Happywise.
We really have to begin by questioning the very label we use every single day: human resources. Think about it. That term was born in a very specific historical context. It was an era that looked at people mainly as just productive factors to be optimized, controlled through payroll and attendance tracking. But in our modern world, a world marked by complexity, uncertainty, and constant transformation, does that old label even make sense anymore?
Well, here is the new perspective. People are not just resources to be administered. They're individuals. Individuals with their own distinct emotions, aspirations, and incredibly diverse potential. Almost like a seedling, just waiting for the right conditions to grow. So instead of asking the old, tired bureaucratic question of how do I manage them, modern organizations really need to ask a fundamentally different question. How do we create the conditions for these individuals to truly thrive? We're talking about nurturing human potential here, not just extracting it.
And to do that, it requires a completely new logic. The traditional logic of management, it aims to control and optimize people, motivating them mostly through external pressure and incentives. But the new approach, the logic of context design, completely transforms HR into an architect of enabling contexts. The whole goal shifts to designing systems and cultures that naturally nurture intrinsic motivation. You aren't forcing people to work. You're actually creating an environment where they can freely express their absolute best selves. Now, this shift relies on a profound philosophical truth. People must always be treated as ends in themselves, never merely as a means to an end. Their well-being matters in its own right, not just for the company's bottom line. And guess what? The research totally backs this up. When people are actually treated as ends in themselves, they end up making their absolute best contributions. When an organization finally sees its people this way, it naturally designs for flourishing.
Okay, let's look at how this builds out practically. One of the most concrete ways HR acts as an architect is through job design. This means taking a hard look at the work itself, the autonomy, task variety, quality of feedback, and inherent meaning. Because if a job lacks these, it produces disengagement, literally no matter how skilled your manager happens to be. But a rich, well-designed job, that naturally produces satisfaction. And this is enhanced even further by job crafting, which is where individuals actively shape their own work to align with their unique strengths and values. It's a real game changer.
But to truly thrive in these well-designed jobs, we have to talk about fuel. People bring 4 types of energy to work: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Now, working hours are a fixed resource, right? But human energy can actually be regenerated. Physical energy requires respecting human limits. Mental energy demands focus, meaning we absolutely must reduce those constant interruptions. Emotional energy thrives on leadership that generates genuine trust. And spiritual energy, that is the deep motivation that comes from connecting daily work to a much greater purpose. We have to allow people to oscillate between intense effort and crucial recovery across all 4 of these dimensions.
Now, for way too long, organizational well-being has been treated as a series of isolated, peripheral initiatives. You know the drill, maybe a yoga class here or a free fruit bowl in the break room there. But true, resilient flourishing doesn't just happen on the margins. It emerges only when well-being is deeply rooted in the structural processes of the organization. It's the result of daily interactions between leadership, culture, workloads, and growth opportunities. HR has got to influence these deep structural dimensions, not just hand out surface-level perks.
So, to systematically build this solid foundation, the new HR role acts on 4 really clear pillars of happiness. It starts with plus being, which is all about developing self-awareness and authenticity for both employees and HR leaders. Next up is plus we, focusing on building systemic trust and a true culture of psychological safety. Then comes plus discipline, where we embed these sustainable practices right into the actual daily rhythms and evaluation criteria of the company. And finally, plus positive chemistry, designing contexts that recognize how our emotions and behaviors actually influence our neurochemistry, literally placing people in the best biological conditions to perform.
Ultimately, the real competitive advantage for any company is not its processes. It's the people who, every single day, bring those processes to life. Organizations are only going to thrive when their people flourish. So, the final question you really have to ask yourself is this: are you still just managing resources, Or are you ready to start intentionally designing the contexts where human potential can truly take root?